To be here today to welcome the arrival of the Freedom Schooner Amistad into Oyster Bay. She arrives now much like she did in 1839 during an unprecedented moment in our history as a nation. This unprecedented moment has upended our daily lives and challenged the way we relate to one another and put the status quo completely at risk as so many anticipate the emergence of a new normal that will frame our lives going forward. The Freedom Schooner Amistad arrives today, much like she did an unprecedented arrival of the La Amistad in 1839. La Amistad arrived in the midst of a world in crisis, bound up in the wretchedness of chattel slavery, hatred, and violence. Yet she came bearing the cry of freedom from the bowels of a cargo ship turned slave ship. She serves even today as an enduring symbol of unity and the human struggle for freedom and human dignity. She was witness to the triumphant and inspiring testimony of souls in chains willing to fight and die for freedom. The Freedom Schooner Amistad arrives today in the midst of a world in crisis as we face an international pandemic, social unrest, and economic uncertainty. Yet, in the midst of this, we have witnessed some inspiring responses. Heroes have emerged from all corners of our world. We have come to appreciate so many that were once ignored. Laboring workers who were nameless and faceless a few months ago are now essential. Brothers and sisters, they were essential all along. Healthcare workers whom we cling to for life but never even knew their names, and today they are the last faces that many of us see on our way home. First responders who continue to come for us regardless of the perils they face. They are now celebrated and given the honor they deserve. Yes, these are unprecedented moments, and yet heroes have emerged from all corners of our world. They bear the cry of freedom from the margins of our society. These voices are an enduring symbol of unity in the human struggle for freedom and dignity. The Black Lives Matter movement has emerged out of the chaos of our time with a cacophony of voices powerful enough to secure freedom, justice, and equality for all of God's children. Black and brown folks, white folks, Jews and Gentiles, Muslims and Christians, gay folks and straight folks, all of God's children crying out for justice. A vibrant new cry for freedom that cannot be ignored or isolated or put aside. A new cry rising from decades of misery linked together through poverty and slavery. A new cry that rises from the nameless and faceless who came here, many of them chained to the bottom of a boat like a pig or a chicken. A new cry that does not bow down to the politics of respectability, but rises with power, unabated and unashamedly speaking for those in chains and seeking their redemption. As we mourn the tragic death of so many, we pause to consider our new nation, our one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We know fully that a moment of silence is not enough to close the festering wound of racism in America. Racism continues to raise its ugly head in our world, and certainly it threatens our unity as the people of God and as a nation consecrated to God, the home of the brave and the land of the free. Brothers and sisters, this is a fateful moment in our history as a nation. We live in an increasingly divided society where our differences are magnified by anxiety, uncertainty, and fear. The constant drive for power and status will not yield trust and reconciliation. We will not survive living according to the cover page of Time magazine, heralded as the divided states of America. Murder of George Floyd and so many others, the virulent anti-Semitism and Islamophobia and homophobia that has claimed so many lives is a problem for all of us. Our ignorance and woeful desecration of one another demands a high toll in human lives. Indeed, tolerance is too thin a veneer for a world steeped in indifference, living in such close proximity. There must be something greater, brothers and sisters, something greater, something enduring that will bond people. The Old Testament prophet Isaiah tells us where the Spirit of God is to be found in a desperate time such as this. Hostile and opposing creatures find harmony and join forces, not tamed by the mighty, but led by a little child. In Isaiah's prophetic vision, the ravages of oppression, suffering, and destruction, indeed the violence of opposition and division, are quieted by a child. So many concerns have been raised regarding the impact of this chaotic moment in our history, as so many are anticipating again the emergence of a new normal that will frame our lives going forward. I am filled with optimism. Indeed, I am the eternal optimist. Yet, I am concerned. While Amistad, the movie, must be applauded for bringing the incredible story of black heroes taking their freedom to the big screen, we must be reminded that so many were left in chains, even as John Quincy Adams stood to represent the women and men of La Amistad in the cause for freedom. Mr. Spielberg also fails to show the price the Amistad Africans had to pay for their freedom. They spent almost their entire 2 years in America behind bars. Their presence created a carnival-like atmosphere where abolitionists took advantage of them by putting the Africans on display like animals in a zoo. Over a 3-day period, more than 3,000 people paid 12 cents apiece to gawk at the Africans. The movie also omitted any reference to the extent to which white missionaries worked zealously to rid the Africans of their names, their language, their customs, and their religious beliefs. The enslaved African Americans here on the plantations could find little respite in the Amistad affair. History records that they saw it basically as a crude lesson in American hypocrisy. They felt a deep sense of betrayal because none of this great moral fervor was directed at their plight, for they remained in chains. When it was all said and done, the status quo did not change for them. There was no new normal for them. They remained in chains. Let us not be lulled to sleep by the myth of integration, then or now. Let us not be lulled to sleep by the myth of progress in the face of police brutality, healthcare disparities, mass incarceration, poverty, and unemployment. Many of us are still in chains. The freedom schooner Amistad arrives at a fateful time in our history as a nation. This is an unprecedented moment in shedding light on the facts of our collective history and the legacy of the transatlantic slave trade. The freedom schooner Amistad provides the means by which individuals and communities can learn the real truth of our existence together. I salute the heroes of the Black Lives Matter movement and the freedom schooner Amistad and her valorous crew as she engages in the important lessons of history inherent in the Amistad incident of 1839. Working together through the Youth March for Freedom, an annual event organized with the New Haven school system on United Nations Day, through Youth for Peace, we can address the issues of racism and intolerance and empower a new generation, a child that can quiet the voices of violence and opposition. In Isaiah's prophetic vision, the ravages of oppression and suffering and destruction, indeed the violence of opposition and division, are quieted by a child, represented by a new generation, empowered by the truth. An empowered generation working together to usher us into understanding, cooperation, peace, and unity, such that all of God's children can thrive in his abundance. It is indeed an unprecedented moment in our history, for out of the chaos of our time, a floating classroom emerges, the freedom schooner Amistad. Together, we raise the flag of the Black Lives Matter movement on the freedom schooner Amistad, that we might transform our nation and indeed our world through a cargo ship turned slave ship, transformed into a symbol of hope and a monument to the pursuit of freedom and human dignity.
Amen.
Amen.
Amen. We love you, Marcus.
Love you too, sister. Glad God brought us our way.
Woohoo! Amistad. La Amistad brought us together. Thanks to Forrest.